This video is about the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It is a human civil rights document that was written and adopted in August of 1789 at the beginning of the French Revolution. France was an absolute monarchy that was ruled over by Louis XVI and his queen, Marie Antoinette, shown here with a boat in her hair. Their social structure, l'Ancien Régime, meaning the old system, divided the population into three estates. The first estate was the clergy, who made up 1% of the population. The second estate was the nobility, who made up 2% of the population. The third estate was everyone else, and made up the remaining 97%. After decades of fiscal mismanagement, France was in terrible debt because of large compound interest they were paying to service their loans. King Louis called a meeting of the Estates General in May of 1789 to see if they could find any solutions to France's plight. The three estates had not met for 175 years. Despite making up only 3% of the population, the clergy and nobility could outvote the 97% in the third estate, so eventually the meetings broke down. The third estate walked out and met with a few sympathetic clergy and nobility and formed the National Assembly. They conceived a radical new program and went to return to the Estates General, but found they had been locked out by order of the king. They gathered at a nearby handball court on June 20th, where they made the tennis court oath. We swear never to separate ourselves from the National Assembly, and to reassemble wherever circumstances require, until the constitution of the realm is drawn up and fixed upon solid foundations. On July 11th, the king fired his popular financial advisor, Jacques Necker. This angered many Parisians, and they went to La Bastille fortress to secure weapons and ammunition. The mob decapitated the governor of the prison, and his head was placed on a spike and paraded around the city. La Bastille had become a symbol of l'Ancien Régime, and by destroying it, they were symbolically dismantling the old system. Word spread through the countryside that mobs and thieves were coming to attack the rural peasants, so many armed themselves and formed militias in what has become known as the Great Fear. When no thieves came, the peasants sacked food shelters and tax offices, destroying any record of debts to the kingdom. These revolutionary acts gave the National Assembly the political capital they needed, and in August they drafted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Before we examine the document in detail, let's investigate who wrote it and what were some of its sources of inspiration. The Declaration was written by le Marquis de Lafayette. He aided the Americans in the Revolutionary War against Great Britain, and he befriended Thomas Jefferson, who also helped to write or at least inspire the Declaration. Another source of inspiration was the Enlightenment thinker Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued that the state should be a product of the general will of the people, and whose most famous quote is that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. This is of course referring to the idea of the social contract that we all enter into without choice. Jefferson is considered a classic liberal, who believes that government's sole purpose is to protect the individual rights that people need to live with freedom. Rousseau, however, is arguing that the government should do whatever is the general will of the people, and this can be considered a form of proto-socialism. These two ideas will come into conflict and are foreshadowing the problems that will follow for the revolution. Now let's examine the articles of the Declaration one at a time. Article 1. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions can be founded only on the common good. So this is an attempt to get rid of the class hierarchy that existed in the Ancien Régime. No more first estate, second estate, third estate. Everyone is equal in terms of rights. Now, we can still have social distinctions in society if they're founded in the common good. So we can have a president who is guarded by Secret Service and gets to live in the White House. We can have judges who we call your worship or your honor. And this is because their positions are for the common good, and society benefits from them having these social distinctions. Article 2. The goal of any political association is the conservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of man. These rights are liberty, property, safety, and resistance against oppression. Now, this article is pure Jeffersonian democracy. The idea of classical liberalism that the state is there to protect the rights of the individual, and that is the full extent of the state's job. Article 3. The principle of any sovereignty resides essentially in the nation. No body, no individual may exercise any authority which does not proceed directly from the nation. Now, this article is more founded in Rousseau. Whereas Jefferson would say sovereignty resides in the Constitution, Rousseau is saying sovereignty resides in the nation, because the nation is a representation of the general will of the people. Article 4. Liberty consists of doing anything which does not harm others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of each man has only those borders which assure other members of the society the fruition of these same rights. These borders can be determined only by the law. So, this is the idea of classic liberalism, that everybody should have the freedom to do whatever they want as long as their actions do not infringe on the freedoms of others. Now, what these borders are determined by the law and the Constitution, and then everyone should be able to live and coexist peacefully with as much liberty as possible. Article 5. The law has the right to forbid only actions harmful to society. Anything which is not forbidden by the law cannot be impeded, and no one can be constrained to do what it does not order. Therefore, for a law to be passed, it has to be deemed harmful to society. This is more Rousseau than Jefferson, because in classic liberalism, actions can only be forbidden if they infringe on someone else's individual rights, whereas this says if their actions are harmful to society, they can be forbidden. So this is a lot more open to interpretation and subject to radical democracy, proto-socialism, and the general will. Article 6. The law is the expression of the general will. All the citizens have the right of contributing personally or through their representatives to its formation. It must be the same for all, either that it protects or that it punishes. All the citizens, being equal in its eyes, are equally admissible to all public dignities, places, and employments, according to their capacity and without distinction other than that of their virtues and of their talents. So this is pure Rousseau, that the law is the expression of the general will, that whatever laws are passed should be decided upon by the people, by democracy, and that all citizens should have the right to contribute personally or through their representatives in their government. Article 7. No man can be accused, arrested, nor detained, but in the cases determined by the law, and according to the forms which it has prescribed. Those who solicit, dispatch, carry out, or cause to be carried out arbitrary orders must be punished. But any citizen called or seized under the terms of the law must obey at once. He renders himself culpable by resistance. So this has three parts to it. First of all, you can only be punished under the law if it's a valid law that has been passed by the general will. The second part is that people just can't go around arresting you or accusing you of doing things if it's not a law passed by the government. And I think this is a relic of the Ancien Regime, where the king and his military would just arrest people for whatever they wanted, and laws weren't really clear or agreed upon. And the last part is that if you are arrested under the terms of the law, you have to obey. Otherwise, you're rendering yourself culpable by resisting the law. Article 8. The law should establish only penalties that are strictly and evidently necessary, and no one can be punished but under a law established and promulgated before the offense and legally applied. This is essentially saying that anything deemed a crime to be punished needs to be strictly and evidently necessary to protect society, and that it's restating that it has to be founded under law and cannot just be an arbitrarily decided upon crime. Article 9. Any man being presumed innocent until he is declared culpable, if it is judged indispensable to arrest him, Any rigor which would not be necessary for the securing of his person must be severely reprimanded by the law. So this is essentially innocent until proven guilty. And the second part is that anyone who unnecessarily arrests someone should be reprimanded by the law. Article 10. No one may be disturbed for his opinions, even religious ones, provided that their manifestation does not trouble the public order established by the law. While this is similar to the Jeffersonian freedom of religion found in the United States, it is influenced by Rousseau in that it says a person's opinions and religious views are okay as long as they don't manifest trouble in the public order. So this foreshadows problems coming later in the Revolution because it is so ambiguous about what that could mean. Article 11. The free communication of thoughts and of opinions is one of the most precious rights of man. Any citizen thus may speak, write, print freely, except to respond to the abuse of this liberty, in the cases determined by the law. This article protects the freedom of speech, the freedom of thought, the freedom to write, the free press. Although at the end it's curious how it says your freedom of speech is limited when it comes to responding to the abuse of this liberty, meaning you can't criticize people for abusing freedom of speech. Article 12. The guarantee of the rights of man and of the citizen necessitates a public force. This force is thus instituted for the advantage of all, and not for the particular utility of those in whom it is trusted. So in order for society to guarantee these rights, there needs to be some type of security force, a police force, a military, that will enforce the law. And it states at the end that it is for the advantage of everyone to have this force, and not for the police or the military to abuse their power. Article 13. For the maintenance of the public force, and for the expenditures of administration, a common contribution is indispensable. It must be equally distributed to all the citizens, according to their ability to pay. In order to pay for a security force and a government, there needs to be a taxation system of some kind that is equally distributed and paid for by all the citizens. But curiously it says, according to their ability to pay, which could possibly be a reference to a progressive tax system. Article 14. Each citizen has the right to ascertain by himself or through his representatives the need for a public tax, to consent to it freely, to know the uses to which it is put, and of determining the proportion, basis, collection, and duration. So every citizen has the right to find out where these taxes are going, what they're being used for, and to see if they're necessary, and to also have a say in determining what should be taxed and what shouldn't be taxed. Article 15. The society has the right of requesting an account from any public agent of its administration. So any person who's been entrusted with a position of power or money needs to be able to show where the money's going, how it's being spent, and how they're running their administration. Article 16. Any society in which the guarantee of rights is not assured, nor the separation of powers determined, has no constitution. So for a society to claim it has a constitution, it needs to guarantee the individual rights listed in this declaration. And also the Enlightenment ideal of Montesquieu, the separation of powers, also needs to be upheld, so that not one person or a small group of people can make all the laws in a given society. Property, being an inviolable and sacred right, no one can be deprived of private usage, if it is not when the public necessity legally noted evidently requires it, and under the conditions of a just and prior indemnity. This final article guarantees private property to all citizens, and saying that no one should be deprived of this private property unless the public deems it necessary to do so, in which case they will be compensated for the loss of their property. Now you may have noticed that many of the articles use the words man and citizen. If you are wondering whether the word man is a generic term for human and also includes women, in this case it does not. The articles only applied to active citizens who were men taxpayers, and non-servants. This excluded women, slaves, and people who did not own property. The rights of women continued to be a debated topic throughout the Revolution, and led to the ironic document, the Declaration of the Rights of Women and Citizen, by Olympia de Gouges in 1791. It stated that this revolution will only take effect when all women become fully aware of their deplorable condition and of the rights they have lost in society. Women did not get the right to vote in France until 1944. The Declaration did not abolish slavery, and France continued to have some of the most profitable slave colonies in the world. Slavery was finally abolished in France in 1848. While not a perfect document, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen was certainly revolutionary in its ideas, and it continued to influence human rights and constitutions around the world for the next 2 centuries.